Hello, podcast listener. This is your host with the most, JJ. This episode of JJ Meets World, well, we're going to start talking about trains, then we're going to talk a little bit about McDonald's, and then we're going to talk a little bit about Star Trek, and then we're going to talk about this weird situation where Tucker's going to seduce multiple people to get some gold. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of JJ Meets World. And by the way, if you'd like to help support our podcast, visit jjmeetsworld.com where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some killer swag at our merch shop, or click the link to Apple Podcast and give us a 5-star review.
1, 2, 3, 4. JJ Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. JJ has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirled as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called JJ Meets World.
Trains, Tucker. It's not what I intended to talk about today, but my frustration's at its peak because on my way to our awesome downtown studio, I got caught by a train. And here's the thing that's the worst. I'm driving down the street and the person in front of me is going the speed limit. How dare they? And if they hadn't, I actually would have been able to go fast enough to beat the train arms several blocks down. But I didn't. And we were able to, well, I was able to eventually use an underpass, but I had to turn around at one of like the train arms that had come down because I had, taken the left to get past it. And I thought to myself, how frustrating to have our city, our downtown area, the jewel of Fargo, as we have been putting it, bookended by 2 train tracks that are active with one commuter rail and then just a lot of like coal and oil and grain and stuff like that that's moving. That's so frustrating. Why didn't they ever change that?
Yeah, I as I was sitting here, I was about to ask you, what are the logistics that are in the way? I mean, obviously there's money involved with rerouting any train track or what have you, but it does seem like from the layman's perspective, can't we just reroute this outside of town so that it's away from people?
You would think so.
And that there's a way to, I understand that, you have to crisscross it at some point with where people go, but that could be on an interstate or highway, or that could be, you could build, you would assume you could build underpasses. I just assume that the people who have control of the money just don't care enough.
I think that there's some weird relationship that we share with the railroad companies as like United States citizens, because if you go way back, the railroad tycoons, right? Like these people who made or broke towns and, like essentially said, okay, listen, we're going to own all the land on either side of the train tracks. And so there's weird lines that go across everywhere that that BNSF, let's say, owns, or Canadian Pacific. And it feels weird to me that we haven't tried to take that land back. It seems bizarre to me that we have done it. And also, I know that it's an efficient way to move bulk goods, but is it still the most efficient way? Like, how are we powering these things?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know.
I just don't know.
Who I think we need to talk to actually is Greg Carlson, because I believe his grandfather worked for BNSF.
Oh, yeah?
As a train conductor. And I believe Greg had told me before, I think it was Greg, that he used to ride the train with his grandpa and like would hang out at the train station and stuff. So like it's kind of in their family. He may have some answers to us as to why that sort of legacy technology is still there. It does seem like, yeah, the infrastructure is already there. So, now you're just using it, right? And you're just using for what you can get out of it. And then it's just the cost of fuel, I guess, that goes into it. But I don't know.
I met someone whose job was to drive a car, not a railroad car, but like a beep beep automobile car for the like BNSF or one of the train systems, and their job was to shuttle people who would be joining the train from places where the train tracks weren't nearby. So let's say you're in Sioux Falls, but you need to get on the train in Fargo to relieve a conductor or an engineer or something like that. This person would drive to Sioux Falls, pick up that person, and then drive them up here. And that was their sole purpose. And I said, okay, so the train can't even get the people they need along their lines. And when you look at like the state of North Dakota, when you look at the Amtrak system, so, which by the way, I no problem against Amtrak. I have enjoyed every train ride I've ever been on with them, but I've never had a massive delay and I've never been through a storm. So those are two things you need to know. It comes into Fargo and then it goes north up to Grand Forks and then it goes across the top of the state and connects to like Minot and then goes down to Wilson. That doesn't make any sense to me. Like, wouldn't you want to connect it to the state capital, if anything?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Reroute just what is a central hub and what is not a central hub. Okay, so then you find a genie, okay?
Okay.
But the genie only grants one wish. It's not a 3-wish genie.
What?
This genie's like, listen, Aladdin really gave people false expectations about what genies can do. We can actually only do one thing.
Okay.
And what we can do is give you a choice between two things, and you have to pick the one. And then you just get that thing.
Okay, so
that's
and they get to pick the subject matter?
Yeah, they get to pick the subject matter.
Okay.
Yeah, so genies are actually pretty restricted in what they can do. Far more restricted than just they live in a lamp and you have 3 wishes. Like, that would be paradise to actual genies. Actual genies would fucking love that.
Right, but instead
You find a shoebox genie, and he's like, nope, I can only give you one wish, but it's really you picking between 2 choices I'm going to give you.
Okay.
Okay.
So the genie I find in a box of Reeboks gives me this scenario you're about to propose.
He says you can either have all of the train tracks that cut through like the Fargo-Moorhead area rerouted out of town so they are no longer in the way of your traveling around this area. That's option number 1. Option number 2 is a high-speed, like bullet train rail line that connects Fargo to Minneapolis-St. Paul.
High-speed train to Minneapolis. And here's why. There's a couple things. This is a multifaceted, I was thinking hard about this in the time you proposed it. Number 1, the city of Moorhead just put like $25 million in 4 years worth of hard work, sweat, tears, years of legislation to get that underpass done right off of like Main Avenue over by the Cullen Hockey Center so that people wouldn't have to be stopped by the train.
Mm-hmm.
If I just suddenly rerouted traffic, they'd be like, all that work was for nothing? What? You jerk.
Yeah, because that wish does not take into account existing projects.
Right.
They're not in on the wish.
Right. Well, and you're just like, yep, all of a sudden there's now a track that goes north of town and boom, there you go. It's done. And reason number 2 is I think that it would be great for, like, if Fargo-Moorhead could be conceivably a commute town to Minneapolis, think of what that does.
I mean, this town would explode, Moorhead would explode, everything, this whole community would just be, would especially because of so there would be that initial rush in because of the lower cost of living.
Right.
But of course, then that changes, right? That spikes and things change. But I would assume that there would just be massive growth for all involved in one way or another. From the state of Minnesota, it's like, yeah, we're going to be feeding one of our smaller towns with with our big city, and that's great, right? That's great for us. And North Dakota is going, we're taking our biggest, richest city and making it way, way bigger.
So a bullet train, the average bullet train, goes up to 200 miles per hour. The French TGV operates at 186 miles per hour. So you're talking about Fargo to Minneapolis in like an hour and 15 minutes, door to door.
That's incredible. I mean, you could live in Fargo and then have a job in Minneapolis.
Think of what that means if you want to go to like a concert.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
You could just start taking in. And it benefits Minneapolis in the fact of like all of a sudden now you've got a whole new workforce, right?
Yep.
You've got more people coming in for events and stuff like that. So essentially you can add Fargo-Moorhead, West Fargo to your population.
Yeah. I even imagine like dating pools. That totally changes.
Yeah.
Right. Now it's like, oh my God, there's even, way more.
If they start building that, the first thing I do, I find an area right next to one of these, like wherever the depots are going to be.
Mm-hmm.
and I started JJ's Cars for Rent. Because I think the trouble you run into is, so you do get this thing and it gets into Minneapolis, but you still need a car to get around Minneapolis, especially if you're someone who's like, oh, I need to get there because I'm going to go to a concert.
Totally.
And you could Uber. It depends on where it drops you off. Because if it drops you off like in Eden Prairie, well, that sucks.
Right. I think that's kind of one of the cool promises of automotive cars, if they can get better, like if depending on how good they can get. Because imagine a world where you own a car and it drives you to work, but then when you're at work, you're like letting it be used as a ride share just automatically or something. Or you
never.
Or you don't do that, but you tell it just to go somewhere and get you groceries. Right?
Okay, that's different,
right? And then let's say you go to a big city and you're like, okay, I need a car. You just order up an automatic car. You never have to deal with a person, and like a municipal version of one would pull up, and then you get in and it takes you wherever you need to go. You're not even touching the wheel, right? So you're someone who doesn't have a driver's license maybe, or who just like you're old and you can't operate a vehicle, or you need to be multitasking or whatever you need, right? That automating that process as well. So you wake up in Fargo, you're like, oh, I got to get to the Garth Brooks concert in the Twin Cities. He's doing a morning concert because he's doing those now because that's a big thing because people have more time. He can fit in a lot during the day. And so you put on pants and then you go outside and you get into your automatic car pod, and then you're just laying there, doing whatever you want to do.
I was going to say, a lot of pornography.
Whatever you want to do while it takes
pod.
you to the hub in downtown Fargo. That is the high-speed rail that will then... Now, the automatic car will just bring you in and just deposit you inside of it, too.
See, I'm thinking that it pulls up onto like a ramp, and it becomes now like part of the train.
Yeah, it could just go inside the train.
Yeah.
And then...
Modular.
Absolutely. Actually, that's actually pretty smart. And
so
then
you never have to leave it.
And then it takes the hour-and-a-half trip, and you're still just jerking it, right? Like you're still flat out.
Right.
You're going to town, And then by the time you're there, you're like, okay, I've had my coffee, I've jerked it a bit,
Everyone's really relaxed and in a good headspace when they arrive.
Yeah, right. And then, you could be drunk. You could be flat out drunk, and that's okay.
Yeah.
You're not driving anything. Get to Minneapolis, then your automatic car pod takes you to the Garth Brooks Stadium because it's named after him because he does this every day. And then...
But here's the thing. It's hardly ever actually Garth Brooks.
Oh, it's a hologram of him that's piped in from the moon because he has Garth Brooks stadiums all over, and this is where you go to worship. And we haven't seen the real Garth Brooks in decades.
Right.
Since the Lunarians invaded. But then we get into... so then you're there, and then you're at the Garth Brooks concert. Maybe you're jerking it still. And then if you're like...
Because the concert venue itself also is modular, so your pod like pulls into where your ticket
left
is.
Your pod. You're still breathing Fargo air.
Yep.
You're still there. And then you're like, you know what? I know I got to get back, but I don't want to make any of those decisions. And I just wish I didn't have to wait through this. So then it drugs you and makes you fall asleep. And then it just carries your lifeless body back to Fargo. And then you wake up the next day just in your bed.
Did you ever see the movie WALL-E? Because you're literally describing the little conveyors that they've got.
Spaceship, and they're like in outer space.
So it's still like this like world that they're inhabiting. Okay, couple of problems though, because in this scenario, which the genie has given you, of you can just have car travel the way it is, or these pods. You choose pods, but there's a couple of caveats. Okay, number one, Delight's song, the one song that's by Delight, that they do, like,
I don't know who Delight is.
Groove is in the heart. That song, Groove is in the heart. Groove is in the heart. Oh, okay. That plays over and over and over in your pod. That's what powers the pod. As it turns out, the 1990s hit by Delight, Groove is in the heart, has an energy source to it, and the Lunarians are the ones who unlock it for us. And so that's how we're able to power these things. And so that's fine and dandy as well. Number two is, unfortunately, it brings up a problem that we now face that we didn't have before, which is in the town that we live in, there's several Taco Bells, but there's really only one good Taco Bell. But now knowing that we'd have within an hour another like 30 options for Taco Bell, you run into the problem of if you want to go to the good Taco Bell, sometimes you got to get on that train.
But I think we reached peak Taco Bell years ago. So whatever happens to Taco Bell, I'm kind of like, it already kind of happened in my heart and my colon. I'm surprised to hear we have a good Taco Bell in this town. I wasn't aware we had a good Taco Bell in this town.
One of them has to be better than the others. They're all crap.
Oh.
But one of them has to be better than the others.
I thought you were specifically like, we both know which is the good one.
No.
I'm like, I actually don't know which is the good one then.
The North Fargo one, the 19th,
19th Avenue is the good one?
Is Taco Bell, is the alpha of Taco Bell's
and is that just because it
Fargo.
burned down a couple of years ago,
Yeah, and
so they had to rebuild it?
I also think for whatever reason, maybe it's because it's so close to the college, it has employees on a more regular basis. The one that's out by the mall, no. I've been burned by them a lot of times by just going and showing up and waiting in the line and then having someone come out and be like, we're out of meat.
Mm-hmm.
We're out of meat. Well, then you should have written that on a piece of white paper and then taped that to the, to the speaker box. The one on South University Drive, that one's never open. Never.
Mm-hmm.
It's never open. So they must have the worst employees. Also, their new sign says Taco Bell, and then right underneath it says breakfast. Mm-hmm. I do not want to think of Taco Bell for breakfast. The Taco Bell in Moorhead, don't even get me started. That place will take 2 hours to make a taco. It's like they're learning. It's like they've taken a bunch of people who've never seen a taco before, and they're like, we're going to explain to you the cultural significance of the taco and then how we bastardize that for these big white money mouths that'll be here consuming a bunch of tortillas. And I think those are all the locations. Is there a West Fargo location for Taco Bell? Can't even think. I don't think so.
I don't think so. I mean, I have no idea.
I don't think so.
I have no
idea.
idea.
There is a good Taco Bell. Talking about the Twin Cities, have you heard about Taco Bell of the future that they built?
I think I did hear about it, and it kind of aligns with what we're talking about, right?
100% does. So, listener, if you haven't heard about this, Taco Bell put a ton of money into R&D and built the Taco Bell of the future to test it out in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So when you pull up to the Taco Bell of the future, it looks like you're pulling up to a bank because the kitchen is on the second floor and you go up and you actually punch in your own order. You don't talk to a human being, or you order in advance and get up there and then push your order from your mobile device to it. And then a dumbwaiter brings your stuff down, kind of like a pneumatic tube, and you get everything. And it's all a bunch of robots that are taking care of it. You can go in, but they don't want you to go in. If you go in, it is a room about the size of a person's desk, and you can order, and then there's no space to sit down. And the idea is that they've got like 5 of these lanes, and so they can get people through quickly. I've talked to people who've been to the Taco Bell of the future, and they said, here's a couple things that I really love about it. Number one, it's so fast. So fast, so efficient, so easy. Taco Bell of the future, great. Number two, if there's a problem with your order, 99.9% of the time, it's because you rang it in wrong.
Okay.
So you have the power to say, like, no cheese. But if you don't hit the no cheese button, if you don't verify no cheese.
Are robots making it then?
I think that there's a good amount of robots that are making them. I think there's a human being who's probably putting the bag in the dumbwaiter. So that's the 0.1% that can mess it up. But if if you can run an entire restaurant operation with one human being,
right?
That's interesting. Somehow I got onto an email server for a thing called Flippy that they want me to invest money in. And Flippy is a robotic arm that can flip burgers and
I've
take
heard of it.
fries out of a thing. And so the idea is that you can replace your entire kitchen staff in a fast food restaurant with like a perfect efficiency. Like Flippy never burns a burger. They never forget the fries.
Mm-hmm.
Like Flippy is like perfect in times out. Flippy doesn't need a break. Flippy doesn't want to go to its cousin's wedding. Flippy is 24/7 like the employee. And so they want me to invest in this company that makes Flippy. And as much as I enjoy fast, efficient, food from a Mickey D's, a Burger Kong, I am never going to be somebody who says, No, I want a robot to make my burger. That sounds good because the human element of making a burger, it should be a slight surprise.
Before we got here, I stopped by McDonald's to get me some breakfast, and I got you a Diet Coke.
Yeah.
And while I guess me saying I got you Diet Coke, that's not really a part of the story. It's more me bragging, like, look what I did for JJ today. I mean, it's not like I needed to say that part. I could have just said, I went through McDonald's to get breakfast.
Is this because I didn't thank you at the get-go
Oh,
of
not
the
at
episode?
all. No. I'm not.
Because this is delicious. Thank you, Tucker. Thank you so much for getting me this.
We have a reciprocal relationship when it comes to drinks and snacks. So no, it's totally fine. You've taken care of me so many times. It's like I'm probably in debt to you when it comes to sodas and stuff like that. So don't even worry about it. I'm just paying off what I owe.
Hey, I appreciate it though. It's nice.
But I was surprised at how quickly I was moving through this time because it's been a number of times I go to fast food. It's dinner rush hour. A lot of people are like me. We're lazy and hungry and just want it now.
Give me my goddamn hash brown.
Give me my goddamn hash brown. And so lady was very nice. She's like, all right, thank you. Pull ahead. And I go up. And then, first of all, I can never tell, am I talking to someone who's actually in the building next to me? Or am I talking to someone on like an internet server? Because sometimes the voice and personality of the person I talk to does not match the voice and personality of the person that I meet. Mm-hmm. I'll be like someone who's super friendly on the phone, like, hey, how's it going? Oh, it sounds good. And it sounds crystal clear. One time I heard someone's dog barking in the background. I was like, oh, is this person at home? I mean, maybe they are. It would make sense that you can have that technology happen. And then it'd be like an old guy who's like, oh, this is not the person I just spoke to, right? Anyway, so I pull up. This is
help me.
Yeah,
someone's broken into my home.
Broken into my home.
I'm being taken hostage.
Yeah. And so the person working the till, I'd say maybe she was like 19 or 20. I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe guessing. And I'm like, I give her my card. She goes, yep. She goes, she repeats my order back to me. I'm like, yep. Give her my card. She goes, sounds good. And then her face like knots up. You can tell she gets suddenly pissed off. But it's because she's hearing something in her headset. Mm-hmm. And she pushes the button on the headset and she goes, can you please just wait 1 minute? Thank you very much. And then like hit the button again. And I'm like, oh shit. And then she goes, I'm trying to do a task here under her breath. And then she rings up my card and then she goes, have a good day. And I go, hey, you have a good day too. Okay. And she goes, yeah, I'll try. I was like, damn, I'm so sorry. You're having a bad day. So something was said to her in her earpiece. And it made me appreciate, that I have a job that doesn't have me doing that. Like I have my own complaints about my job, but I don't have to be in a drive-through window throughout the day. That would probably really suck.
Yeah. I also think you learn a lot about how like nobody wants something just the way it is, right? So it's a Big Mac, fries, and a medium Coke is like, you know, the go-to meal at McDonald's, but people are like, okay, but no onions on it.
Right.
And it must be frustrating because you could just push one button, but most of the time you push one button and then you push the 5 other buttons to get it the way you want.
You know what, though? Here's something I need to try to remember too when I think about things like fast food work. Like yes, like I've had plenty of instances where I've gone to any restaurant, fast food or not, and thought the service was poor, right? And it shouldn't be, right? They should be doing their job as best they can. But I also want to remember that people in these jobs, there's a really good chance, especially if you're catching towards the end of their shift, that someone said something shitty to them today, right?
Yeah.
Some customer treated them like shit. Someone did that. It happens all the time. It's not, yes, the job itself, like the dealing with food and cleaning and all those other things, those suck. That's not fun. But that's not the worst part of the job. The worst part of the job are the customers. And you are going to have so many just shitty customers come through that it's going to really wear down your sense of humanity. Like, are we all in this together? I'm not sure. It doesn't feel like that when I'm in the middle of doing this job. And I need to remind, so like, I'm always trying to be as extra warm and polite as I can, just because there's a chance that the person who was there right in front of me just told them like, hey, I said a large.
How hard is your job?
How hard is your job, really? Did you press a button? Right? That kind of shit. So
let me tell you about a situation where you should have been standing behind me at a fast food restaurant because I certainly went off the rails. I am a senior in high school. In fact, it's the senior summer. Like I've just graduated And I was down at the lakes, and I had 3 friends with me, and my sister had a friend. And it was my job to drive us all back to Fargo. Now, my lake cabin, we usually took back roads. So anyone who's from this region knows the Downer Road. Take the Downer Road, gets down to, Cormorant Village, and then you go by Zorba's, and you take the Vergas Road. But for this time, for whatever reason, we decided to take Highway 10. And it was like 4:30, and it's like, hey, do you guys want something to eat at McDonald's before we go? And it was like, yeah. And there were enough of us that I said we should go in because it's too, like when it's like, okay, you owe me $4.75.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm like, everyone go in and we'll order separately. So we go in, and I get my usual, which is 2 plain cheeseburgers, Diet Coke, and a medium fry. That's my go-to meal there, and I have to spell it out because I like my cheeseburgers plain.
That's a very sensible. I've never had a McDonald's meal like that. It's
because there's so much sugar in those buns that I love it. I want more bun. Give me more bun. So we get in there. I make my order. My friend makes his order. My other friend makes his order. My sister makes her order. And so we're about to walk out, and Chrissy's like, "Oh, they didn't give me my pop." And so she went up. And she talked to the person. I'm not really paying a lot of attention. She comes back and I'm like, "Where's your pop?" And she goes like, it doesn't matter. Never mind. It doesn't matter. And so I'm like, "They didn't give you a pop?" And she's like, no, they didn't. And I said, "Well, what did you order?" She goes, "I ordered a number 7, which was the 2 cheeseburger meal as well. That's what Chrissy likes to boot." And so I was like, "Oh, it's okay." And so I was like, "Hey, she ordered a number 7, but she didn't get a soft drink." They're like, "No, it doesn't come with a drink." I said, McDonald's has spent billions of dollars putting together the extra value meal, which, as you can see right there from your light up sign, is make it an extra value meal with fries and a drink. And they're like, "Well, at this location, we've actually noted that most people don't want the drink. So we've actually repriced it so that if you look on your receipt," and I look at the receipt, and sure enough, it says 2 cheeseburgers rung up separately and a fry. And there's no drink. Like, it doesn't say extra value meal. And I said, "Hey, listen, I know I'm just a guy, but I'm a guy who's been watching McDonald's commercials for 30 years. Well, at the time, it was only 18. And I said, "You can't just change what's in this thing without telling us." And they're like, "But you didn't get charged for the drink, so you didn't pay for a drink." And I was like, "That's not the point right now. The point I'm trying to tell you is if friggin' Donald J. McDonald came in here and he ordered an extra value meal and you didn't give him a drink, he'd go, 'What the hell? What's wrong with these people?' We've literally based our whole business around upselling you by making it sound like it's the extra value meal because you get a discount on the fries and a discount on the drink when you add it to any of our sandwich offers." And so I'm going back and forth. Finally, the manager comes over and they go, "If we give you a drink, will you get out of here?" And I'm like, the drink is not the issue right now. The issue is you are a rogue McDonald's and you've gone completely off the rails. What a disservice you're doing. You're telling me there's enough people who've gone to the municipal liquor store next door to get a bottle of hooch and came over here and goes, "I don't need a Sprite. I want to save the money on the Sprite so that I can feed my children. But first I want to gobble down just my fries and my drink because it'll make it easier for me to choke and die on this food."
Yeah.
I just didn't get it. And so I made a huge scene, massive scene. And when we left, I handed my drink to my sister, and I was just like, I can't believe this. And my friend Jay Scott said, "Well, I guess we can't ever go back to this McDonald's again." Thanks, JJ. And years later, I went back to that McDonald's and I ordered an extra value meal, and I had to say and that includes a drink, right? And they said, "Yes, we stopped doing that."
Yeah.
Because what manager makes that insane decision?
That is pretty. It's weird to go, "Hey, listen, I know up there it says you'll get this, but we'll just do something different."
I know literally the branding you're staring at and you ordered from says this. Get up there with some electrical tape and change it all. And don't call yourself a McDonald's anymore. Call yourself like a McSpringers.
And if it's more for simplicity of ringing it up on the back, just make a button where it's like, "Oh, they want basically the volume, but they want it without the soda." Just click that, and then it's automatic, so you don't have to do any extra math or stuff, right?
Are you okay? So this is on a major highway. A major highway. Also, it's lakes area where the majority of people don't actually live there during the summer. You know, they are commuters. They own like cabin somewhere. So you are at this point taking for granted the fact that every person who comes to McDonald's is a local, and so local that they already know this. Like you had a citywide meeting that said like, you know, someone's running around the bullhorn being like, city meeting tonight, city meeting, important McDonald's information will be shared. And everyone got together in the high school gymnasium, and the manager of McDonald's said, listen, we've noticed that so many of you come in, but you don't do anything with the cup except for spit chewing tobacco. So how many of you would like us to get rid of this? And they're like, yes. So saith the shepherd, so saith the flock. And they killed a virgin while they were at it, so they all had to be kept, you know, it was all secret now. And the idea was that the citizens of Detroit Lakes will now no longer accept a beverage with their extra value meal unless requested.
Do you think like what actually happened was Garth Brooks was driving through one day and was like, you know what? I'm feeling extra generous right now. And so I'm going to get a bunch of burgers and fries and bring them to the next concert and give them to a bunch of people. And so he stopped at that place and he ordered like 100,000 cheeseburgers and medium fries, but not any sodas. And then when corporate looked at it, like just the average throughout the year, it just threw off the average. It's like, well, people are buying, you know, cheeseburgers and medium fries at a massive rate without any sodas, without realizing, no, that was one instance when Garth Brooks came through.
I think it's more likely that the manager, Cheryl, her nephew, Mark, who had just gotten out of jail because he'd been stealing boat trailers. He'd been going and like hooking up boat trailers while people were out boating and stealing them and then selling them. So Mark just got out of jail and needed a job. And Mark, wanting to get the people around, not to treat him differently just because he had been in jail, started farting in the cups. And he thought this was really funny, right? And so like the cups all come like in a big sleeve in a bag. And so he would just like give a good old jailhouse toot right into the bag. And someone's like, oh my God, this Fanta tastes like shit. And so Cheryl finds out what Mark's done, but she can't fire Mark because that's it. If he gets fired, he has to go back to the clink. And so she goes, all right, here's what we're going to do, Mark. We are going to drastically change the corporate policy and menu of the largest restaurant chain in the world to cover this up. But I swear to God, Mark, this is the last time. This is the last time I help you. And if your mother hadn't asked me on her deathbed when she was dying of brain cancer to take care of you, I would not be doing this. And Mark says, okay. And then she also says, can I store some boat trailers like in the back parking lot? And she says, yes.
Wouldn't that preclude them from selling any sodas with any value meal?
No, because when you choose it, like all of a sudden, like if it tastes like garbage, because it's not part of the extra value meal, you can do a return much easier, right? Because it's individualized. There's no like just return for that. And this would dissuade people from getting the drink, period.
Every time I think about fast food complaints, I think about this one instance where I was a kid and Dad was taking us through the McDonald's drive-thru, and I get like a Happy Meal, and I take out the burger and I bite into it, and it is completely raw.
Ooh. It
is a flat-out raw piece of meat, and I'm like, Dad, what's wrong with my burger? And I remember watching his face go beet red, and he's like, spit it out. I went, bleh. And then he turns around and gets out of the car and walks furiously into the McDonald's, and then he comes back with like 2 cheeseburgers in his hand, like triumphantly. And I don't know how that conversation must have gone inside, but that was weird. I remember it was weird because McDonald's hamburgers, I would assume they're going to be either frozen patties or they're going to be like a slurry that gets spread out. So I don't know if it was something that had just been sat and then de-thawed, or had been cooked for like 5 seconds and that was it. And then they thought it was a done burger for some reason, like it got charred on the top just enough, or what it was. But it was absolutely raw.
I have to imagine that they make the burgers at like a central kitchen and then send them out, and all you have to do is warm them. but I could be wrong. I know the original McDonald's, they were frying actual burgers. So that was something that they did like legitly back in the day.
You know what? I'm going to leave a message here for my friend James and see if he responds, because he worked at McDonald's for a really, really long time.
Oh, good.
So we'll see if he responds to this. He might not. Hey, James, when you worked at McDonald's, just a question is like when they prepare the meat patties, do the meat patties come as frozen discs that then get put on the fryer, or like or is it like a slurry, or just like a bunch of ground meat that gets like packed into it somehow in like a conveyor belt line? Like, what way does the meat patty arrive at McDonald's and get made? Okay, we'll see what he says there.
Oh, I love this.
I left it on Telegram. Do you use Telegram, JJ?
I don't use Telegram.
You and
Should
I
I be using Telegram?
Well, I mean, you use whatever you want, but like, it's I guess this is kind of like a totally different topic, but it's one of my. It's weird to complain about the technologies that make our life easier.
Oh yeah,
right.
Mm-hmm,
It is. It's kind of. It feels silly too.
Like, I can't believe how loud my Roomba is.
Right. But what was I going to say?
Telegram. Come on.
There are so many different ways. There's so many different platforms to communicate with each other, but they all do the exact same thing. They're all the same thing. They're just different titles and software configurations. So when I'm communicating with people, I have to keep 7 or 8 different apps on my phone, because different people I know prefer different communication methods. So like with you, it's primarily text messaging. Greg Carlson, it's like Facebook Messenger. Mike Resel, it's going to be Telegram. I have some friends who want to use Signal. Friends who want
Discord. I know a lot of people
I use
that.
Discord for stuff. I use Slack for work stuff, and on and on. And my sister prefers like usually like a Google platform for FaceTiming stuff. It's platform after platform after platform. And I wish there was a way to just connect them all, so that you could just be in the app that you like. Like, yep, this is sort of the operating system on my computer that I like, right? But there's no meaningful difference. But you could be in Facebook Messenger, I could be in Telegram. We could be talking to each other, having the platform that we each prefer, and then just going from there. Because I also really like, as a form of communication, doing the recorded voice messages in a chat thread. I have a number of threads with different friends in Telegram, and I really like that way of communicating, because it's easier for me to do that than text messages, but I'm not committing to we're all here on the phone talking to each other at the same time as well. And so like I've got a group chat with some of my friends from back in high school, and this is how we stay in touch with each other. And we're talking almost every single day, because we're not locked into a time we all have to be there to talk. We all have our own lives, but we can each leave messages to the group on this thread with voice or video or photo or text, however we want to do it. And I really, really like it. But like different text platform, every platform has like variations of that, but it doesn't all work the same, right? And then I feel bad about going, well, can I convince people to get into the platforms that I prefer? Like, I really like Telegram, but I'm not gonna train my mom and my dad in how to do Telegram. That would be a nightmare. Like, the fact that they can text at all is a miracle. Right? So I'm just gonna go with that.
Hey, I got bad news for you. The genie makes it happen where everything works together, but you only receive everything by fax. So if you're not near your home fax machine, these messages are going to pile up and pile up and pile up. Also, like, people who still fax are sending you like joke of the day faxes.
Does faxing still happen?
Yeah, I'll do. Okay, there is a local, like, it's a business, but it's like an entertainment based business that still wants people to fax or mail in like registration. So like, hey, if you want to show your pony at our event, you need to fax or mail it in. And it got to the point of where recently I was like, hey man, no thank you. We will have a web like site address this. And I can't believe how backwater that is.
Every time I think about faxing, I think about Achewood, which is my favorite online comic strip. And the two main characters are Ray Smuckles and Roast Beef, who I think of as you and me. And there's one where Ray Smuckles is on the phone with some insurance agent or whatever, someone, and they're asking him if he can fax them his information. And he says, fax it to you? You want me to fax it to you with a fax machine? No, I don't have a fax machine. I also don't have an Apple IIc, polio, or a Falcon. If there was the world we were talking about earlier,
Yeah.
where we're waking up, and then we're probably just naked the whole time, and our pod bed brings us into the pod car. You know, we've even pooped right there. Like,
By the way, also, just real quick, the pod, that is part of Paul Verhoeven's view of the future, because in the movie Total Recall, that's what taxi cabs are like.
Right,
Johnny
right.
cabs.
he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a visionary. We should listen to him.
Is he?
Yeah, he's
Is
a
he?
complete visionary.
Okay.
he is the architect of the future. He is the Walt Disney if we would let him be.
Oh, he's the Walt Disney of what body was it, like body transformation porn?
Body horror or something is like the term for it.
So you think Jeff Goldblum's going to turn into a fly?
What I'm saying is that in the world that we spell out, though, the movie Planes, Trains, and Automobiles just doesn't happen.
What?
It doesn't.
So you're saying that, okay, you're not saying we evolve technology. You're saying the moment that cars are created, they're pod cars.
Does the plot of Planes, Trains, and Automobiles take place if it's in a world where they're each just getting into their automatic pod that they're already waking up in, they're just jerking it all the way to wherever they got to go, and then they get there, and like they would never even interact. There are no planes or no automobiles. I mean, I guess the automatic pod is an automobile, but you're not sharing it.
Mm-hmm.
How does that movie happen?
But the pod also gets onto a train, as we discussed, and we never said anything about air travel.
Right. But I mean, but this definitely, you would not fly to Minneapolis if you could take
planes, pods, and trains. No, planes, trains, and autopods.
It'd be pods, trains, and Garth Brooks stadiums.
Yeah, here's what happens.
It'd be Garth Brooks stadiums.
Here's what happens.
That's the shelter area. To get away from the Morlocks.
You have to get onto a plane, that's the one time you actually have to get out of your pod, right? So you get out of your pod, and Steve Martin gets out of his pod, gets up there, finds out the plane's been canceled, so he's got to go back to his pod, and they have accidentally at the valet given away his pod.
But it's an automatic pod. It's driving itself.
Right, yeah. And that's the thing, is they had somebody else get into that pod.
But they don't touch it at all. It is taking care of itself.
Right, yeah. So someone gets into his pod and it takes off.
But wouldn't the pod have a security feature that would eject you?
Nope.
Or at least fill the pod with poisonous gas?
No, and I'll tell you why. Because you are watching so much adult content in there that it's really impossible to know what's happening at any given moment.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's sweaty, sometimes it's...
Yeah.
And like, sometimes your kid needs to take your pod.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to take a black lead into a pod after a teenage boy was using it.
You do not.
No.
And so, luckily, he sees John Candy, and John Candy's like, you can ride in my pod with me. And so John Candy sits down, and then Steve Martin sits on his lap, and the movie's all done with a fish angle lens for an hour and 45 minutes.
Don't you think he'd have a recall
beep,
button,
beep,
though, where he's like,
beep,
let me just
beep,
recall
beep,
the
beep,
wrong
beep,
pod,
beep.
the pod that was taken with someone else, and he'll just come back to me.
Yeah, and that's the problem, because the pod comes back and it's been destroyed.
Oh,
like
so it's just gone.
Yeah, like some person with a mohawk that you can't trust. A lot of piercings. They're the ones who took it, and they were like, "I'm pushing this pod off of the interstate."
You know, 1990s beat 'em up games were really anti-punk, weren't they?
They were.
Because all of the bad guys, the on the street, were always mohawked dudes.
Streets of Rage is a prime example.
Streets of Rage. I think the Ninjas just fight foot soldiers the whole time. But yeah, the Streets of Rage is a big one.
The movie King Ralph, which supposes if the entire royal family were electrocuted on an aluminum I
feel good.
Yeah, on an aluminum. What's those things that if
It's
you
a riser. I mean, it's like it's
yeah, but like there's a word for it. Like when you watch a baseball game, you sit in the like bleachers, aluminum bleachers, and it turns out that one of them had a dalliance years ago with a woman who moved to America and gave birth to Ralph, played by John Goodman, who's a Las Vegas performer, and so now Ralph is king of England. But in that, they really pull a nice switcheroo because they keep cutting to these punks watching TV through like a department store window. And at one point they cut back after Ralph has made this wonderful speech and he's crying and he goes, I really like that guy. And it shows that even a punk can have a heart. And they can appreciate their leaders.
Star Trek 4, when they're on the bus and they're like, could you please turn that down? And he gives them the bird, right? And then Spock uses the Vulcan sleep grip or whatever it is and knocks the guy out. And he turns off his stereo with his face. And the whole bus applauds because, like, God, this annoying punk is on this bus listening to his punk music.
Do you remember when your Uncle Paul was on and I said that my favorite Star Trek was Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home? And then that pretty much ended our conversation. Like, he didn't want to talk about that anymore because I had picked the wrong Star Trek.
Really? That's not how I remember that at all.
Yeah. I remember the ultimate disappointment. And then, because he is a Star Trek encyclopedia.
Yeah,
a walking Star Trek
my recollection is he loves Star Trek 4.
I'm sure he likes Star Trek 4, but when I'm like, yeah, I'm going all in. Like, if there's only one Star Trek left, it would be Star Trek 4 where they go and get the whales.
I think we need to bring him back on for a specifically Star Trek focused.
Yeah. Star Trek 4 focused.
Star Trek 4 focused.
I only want to talk about the Voyage Home.
Yeah.
You know what's funny is they're like, okay, so the Klingon warbird goes back in time, but how are we going to let people know that it's landing in this park even though its cloaking mechanism is on? They're like, how about if we have 2 aluminum garbage cans and it crushes the garbage cans? Like, that's a great idea, Gene. Good work.
The movie takes place in 85?
I believe it does, yeah.
My birth
the year it like comes out in theaters.
Yeah, and the year I was born. So that's one of the many reasons why I loved it. It's like, oh, this was the world the year I was born. Where Star Trek, they went back to this world. This is a historical document, right? But I after high school, I was working at Videoland for a summer, and I was working with Rudy Sigmund, who I believe I just passed in traffic the other day. So, hey, shout out to Rudy if you listen to podcasts at all. And he was the founder of ValleyCon, and he was no longer running it, but he was still helping out with stuff. And he was charged that year with picking up Walter Koenig, who played Chekhov in Star Trek, the original
Nuclear
cast.
Vessels.
Exactly. Picking him up from the convention because he was the convention guest and bringing him to the airport. And he said, hey, do you want to come with me and just meet this guy? I was like, yes, I do. Of course I do. That'd be awesome. And he had heard that Koenig, I believe, was a collector of buttons or something like that. So he was like, I'm going to give him these buttons just as a thank you for being here and stuff. And Rudy was someone who was known for having a large collection of celebrity autographs, right? So I was like, okay, this is the guy to hang out with. I've never really met a celebrity before, someone who I think is really cool. So we pick him up and we take him to the airport. And as we're walking in and we're taking him to the checkout counter, the guy at the counter looks at him and recognizes he's from Star Trek, but he goes, hey, Scotty.
Oh.
And Walter Koenig goes, close. And Rudy said to him, oh, that must be pretty annoying whenever that happens. And he said, only when they call you Uhura, is what he said. And then, so we get him checked in, and then I'm just thinking, all right, well, very nice to meet you. And he said, can I buy you guys a cup of coffee? I have to wait for a little bit. We're like, absolutely. So he buys us coffee, and we sit down, and we were there for like half an hour, and it was fun. Like, Rudy kept saying the nuclear vessels line over and over again. I got to ask him about, like, he did some time on Babylon 5. He had just done either some Broadway or off Broadway at that point recently. And I was asking about that. He was a really nice guy. Got a photograph with him, and then he left. And as he leaves, I turn to Rudy and I go, oh, shoot, I had meant to ask him for an autograph. I totally forgot to. And then I look down at the table and I see that Koenig has left his styrofoam coffee cup. He's finished it. And it's just sitting there. And as a joke, I said, wouldn't it be funny if I just took like his garbage, like I took his coffee cup? And Rudy goes, why don't you? And so I took it, and I still have it. I have a styrofoam cup that Walter Koenig drank out of, just in storage. And it's still got some dried coffee spots inside of it.
And there's a collector out there who's right now being like, "Ooh, I'll pay anything for that coffee."
There's
cup.
no way for me to really prove it. I could prove that I had met him with a photo of me and him, right? or if I brought Rudy in to get it corroborated, but I would never be able to. I had at one point thought, okay, what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to try to make this an even more special of like a nerd thing, right? So maybe I can get nerdy celebrities to sign this thing. And so I was going to try to get Bruce Campbell to sign it. And Bruce Campbell came to town at the Fargo Theater for, was it Bubba Hotep, I think?
I think it was the man with screaming brain.
That was
it?
Man with the Screaming Brain. And he was touring with it and like doing kind of a stage show where he would like talk and answer questions and stuff. And then he was getting, then you could go through and get something signed. But so I was going to have him sign that, but there they told us he will only sign Bruce Campbell related merchandise.
Sure.
So it has to be a movie poster of his or a book or something. He's not going to do anything else. I was like, oh, shit. So I didn't get it signed, but I had bought his book, got that signed.
Which is funny because at that same event, you had a friend who was just like, hey, come on over to the place where I work later tonight and have some pancakes.
Yeah.
And he was like, okay.
Yep.
So I feel like maybe his handler was the one who was like, only Bruce Campbell stuff. And he's like, I'll sign whatever you want. Doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah, that's true. He may have done it in the moment. But like when I walked up to him, he was up on the upper level at the Fargo Theater where the Marge statue is. I was towards the end of the line, so he was already kind of worn out for the day, and I could tell he had exhausted all modes of conversation with everyone. So he was doing what he could to just get through.
The Adventures of Briscoe County Jr. was a great show.
Exactly, and I understood. So I wasn't expecting anything, but I walk up to him and I put my book, and he goes, "Hey, how's it going? What's your name?" I'm Tucker. Hey, thanks for coming to Fargo. It's pretty cool that you're here. And he goes, yeah. And then I can tell he's like, I should say something more. That's not enough. I should say something more. And so he signs my book and he hands it to me. He looks at me and then he looks over at the Marge statue and he goes, so Marge, huh? And I look at the Marge statue and back at him and I go, yeah, it's pretty cool. And he goes, I wonder how they got it here. And I said, probably like in a truck or something. And that was the entire conversation I had with Bruce Campbell. So instead of getting my Walter Koenig styrofoam cup signed, I had.
So you're holding that cup though, like you're holding this cup.
It's in my bag at that point. I had put it away, so it wasn't out. I wasn't gonna because I'm still trying to protect it. Right?
Is the cup flat now?
No, it's in perfect condition.
It's perfect.
Yep.
Is there any teeth marks or anything on it?
I don't believe so.
Examination?
No. I don't think any DNA has survived. So this was 2003, I think. I have a couple old artifacts of mine that are in amazing, pristine condition. I have a Garfield balloon, that was given to me in 97. By Troy Parkinson's mom when I was in my first play, Ghost Chasers. And so it's about, I'm showing JJ the size of a box. But
yeah, it looks like maybe 18 inches by 12 inches.
Yeah, something like that. And it's in the shape of Garfield. And it's still fully inflated. Has not deflated since 1997.
Oh my God.
Yeah, hasn't had a puncture. It's been in all sorts of boxes and stuff. And I just saw it the other day. While I was going through some stuff in the garage, it's still in perfect condition. So it's I'm kind of surprised this balloon has held on since 1997, perfectly sealed. Right?
Yeah. Do you have anything else? That's
I know I've got a Power Rangers autograph.
From which one?
It was the team. So
what?
it was at one point when Dad and Pat were living on 3rd Street. I remember being over there one time and Dad was on the phone with someone. He got off the phone and I'll have to ask him who it was, but he was connected to somebody who was working on the Power Rangers show.
Like Saban himself?
No, like a lady who was a production assistant or something like that. And so he goes, guess who I just talked to? A friend of mine who's working on the Power Rangers. Do you want an autograph? She'll get you one. I was like, yeah. So in the mail, I got a promotional photo, black and white photo of the team. It was the second lineup. So it was after Jason and Kimberly and Trini had all left.
Okay.
Right. So Tommy was the White Ranger and they had Rocky and I think it was Alicia and what was his name? Adam, maybe?
Yeah. Or Billy, the blue one?
No, Billy was still there. Billy was still there, but the ones who replaced Jason, Trini, and Kimberly, they were Rocky. I think it was Alicia. And I think it was Adam. I think was his name.
Okay.
And it was that group. And it said, to Tucker and all that stuff. And I remember just sitting and staring at it like all
that's
night,
awesome.
thinking this is the coolest thing. Isn't it kind of cool to have like not in the sense of a materialist sense, but in the sense of having objects that are really special to you that like for whatever reason just like bring joy up inside of you like that.
I have an original piece of Dr. Seuss artwork that my sister got me like 20 years ago as a gift, and that thing like I love it. I love looking at it. It means something to me, and even though we find out more and more that Dr. Seuss may not have been an awesome human being, but
what do you mean?
He hated kids apparently.
What?
Yeah.
Where are you hearing this from?
Oh, you should look it online. Like they're talking about how like
all things are online. Like
but there's some people who are talking, and I mean it was no surprise like that Theodore Geisel was not a fan of children, and so writing children's books. It's great. He also was quite xenophobic.
Really?
Yeah.
What the H?
And so like during World War II, he'd made a ton of awesome like propaganda stuff that continued in his artwork. And I'm like, no, we probably shouldn't be doing that.
Okay.
But Disney had the same thing with their like World War II propaganda stuff.
Sure.
I think Charles Schultz is another person that people are like, yeah, it wasn't
The Peanuts guy?
exactly. Yeah, it wasn't exactly the dude that we thought that he was.
No kidding.
Yeah, but I mean, these are codgety old men. Of course,
what
they're
about
going
Bill
to
Watterson?
Well, who knows? Because no one can find him. Right? It's
Right.
like no one wants.
He did participate in some documentary though.
He did not.
I thought he did a voice. He did
In
narration.
that, like Finding Bill Watterson.
Yeah, I thought his voice
no,
was in it.
He does not. And I remember being super pissed off because I mean they had archival footage and stuff like that of him, but this dude finds like where his house is and then like knocks on the door and he's like, oh, he's not home. And I remember being like, wait a minute. So I just watched a 95-minute documentary about like how awesome this dude is and how like I love Calvin and Hobbes, and you weren't even able to like get an interview with him? Come on, man.
Right.
Anyway,
Could you ever live that lifestyle where you're just like this mercurial hobbit who hermit?
No.
Not hobbit, hermit. I mean hobbit as well.
yeah.
If I was a hobbit, I'd be
A hobbit,
hermit.
a hermit hobbit?
Yeah.
A hobbit hermit?
Yeah.
No, I couldn't, because if I was creating something like that, partially, and here's the beauty, Bill Watterson needs to do that because his is all about imagination, right? So like Calvin is very isolated for most of the time. He's out in the woods, he's like, making the snowman. And yeah, there's scenes with mom and dad, there's scenes with, the babysitter, there's scenes with, but for the most part, Calvin is by himself. And so I think for him, he needs a little bit of isolation to be able to get that imagination going versus like anything that I'd create. Like if I'm creating a series about, a group of felons who are going to a community college, I can't be by myself. I got to be amongst a bunch of people to get inspiration and ideas. Be like, there's this one where they go and they don't understand what a McDonald's value menu is because they've been in jail the whole time since this was addressed. So to me, that would be, I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that hermit lifestyle. Now I love being alone, but I also like when I was at the lake, I'd love a place where I can be secluded and be alone. But then it's a quick 5-minute drive to go to the grocery store and talk to people.
Yeah.
That's what I want.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the solitude and the serenity of solitude, but not without the creature comforts of modern day living.
Right. I want a situation like Mel Gibson has in The Man Without a Face.
What is the situation he has?
He's got a cabin that's secluded because he only has half of a face because he's in a car accident with a young boy. And then this other young kid seeks him out, and he used to be an educator. And this kid wants to go to like a naval academy, but his grades aren't good enough. So he spends the summer allowing himself to be tutored by the man without a face. And then he tells people that he's going to see this guy. And then it reignites the discussion about whether or not this guy was a pedophile.
Oh,
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah. The Man Without a Face. For whatever reason, I've probably seen that movie like 20 times.
Really?
Yeah.
That
And
movie.
it's not good. It's not great.
I can't remember which one of my parents, but I remember
Norstad.
in the early days of email forwarding, one of my parents forwarding an email talking about like how The Man Without a Face is actually a biographical pic of Mel Gibson. And that's why he made it, was that it was actually deeply tied to his life and that he had facial reconstructive surgery at one point. And I remember as a kid being like, I feel like this isn't true.
No.
But I remember one of my parents forwarding that email very early on. It's always stuck with me as like a first instance of, I don't think you looked into this. I think you saw this and read it and thought that's interesting and forwarded it.
Have you? So right now on social media, there's the problem with like folks who don't understand that just because someone puts a picture of Robert Downey Jr. and then a quote underneath it, Robert Downey Jr. didn't necessarily say that.
Right.
And I'm running into that right now with people who be like, well, did you see what Robert Downey Jr. said about school shootings? And I was like, well, he didn't say anything. So that's what you need to know right off the bat. They're like, no, I saw it. I saw an article about it, and I'm like, no, you saw a meme about it. Like, that's not. And like trying to navigate that while also being respectful at the same time is proving to be more and more difficult all the time.
Yeah. If the phrase that makes me instantly distrust whatever follows it is the phrase, you know what I heard? Whenever I hear that, I'm like, I'm about to hear some grade A bullshit.
The Sarah Silverman program, which, by the way, if you never watched it when it was on Comedy Central, you deserve like a treat to go back and rewatch it. It is so good, and her real life sister plays her sister in it. But there's one episode where they're all having brunch and they're doing this thing that's like, well, you know what I read about, and then they make like a fart and it gets to her and she's like, you know, I heard it on the radio. No, I read it. And she's like trying to play a game and she goes like, and then the entire, like, it's a master class in lighting because all the light disappears except for a pool of light on her face. And she goes, I pooped. And it's just perfect. That show is hilarious. And they get these perfect moments where she's at a red light and another car pulls up to her and they both have their windows down. He goes, huh, same car. And she goes, yeah, same car. That's so cool. And like needlessly, like, right? Like this guy just knows like, hey, we got the same car. Yeah. And she just is just awful.
You know, I have noticed the Subaru effect where if you are a Subaru driver and someone else who is a Subaru driver sees you, they will say something to you. It's happened a few times. And I myself have found myself with like an elitist mindset about other Subaru owners that aren't Foresters. Like, oh, is that an Outback? Okay. You know, but no, seriously, like I had a guy roll down
nice Atlas.
I had a dude roll down his window and go, Subaru. When I pulled up next to him, I had another guy go, hey, I'm about to buy a gray Subaru. Do you like yours? When he was filling up with gas and I'm walking into the gas station, I said, yes.
Do you think that there's a time where a shockingly beautiful woman will come in here and then it's like bump, ba-da-da, ta-ta, ta-ta, bump, ba-da-da, ta-ta, ta-ta. And she goes, hello, Tucker. My name is Michelle. And she's like,
sounds a lot like Inspector Clouseau.
I noticed that you drive a Subaru. And what she does is she essentially honeypots you. And she convinces you that she's in love with you, but it's
I'm easily plied at this moment, yeah.
And
I'd fall into this trap.
The thing is that she's found that by seducing you through your Subaru is the easiest way that she can get at the jewels and gems inside. And the reason she's seducing you is
for the Subaru itself.
She got a genie out of an old Adidas box, and the genie's like, all right, so I can tell you where $1 billion worth of gold bullion is, or I could give you a lifetime supply of beef bouillon for soups. And she's like, well, I only like chicken-based soup, so I will take the gold bullion. And he goes, there's a Subaru Forester out there, and it's all under the driver's seat. And so she has to go from Subaru Forester. She's got a master list, a printout. You know, like when printers had to use the little dots on the side, like the little like feed dots.
Printer, yeah.
And so
that's what I've been smelling all this time is all this chicken bouillon that's under my front seat.
Right, because she replaces it with soup.
Right.
You should get that checked out. Michelle. And the thing is that she seduces everyone with a Forester.
Okay.
Of all makes.
But how far does the seduction go? Like, do I get anything out of it?
No.
Does she want the Forester or the bouillon?
She wants the bouillon, but she has to get to the Forester to get to the
But she can have it. Like, I don't want it.
But you don't. But she doesn't want to alert you to the fact that you might have it.
So, okay, listen. There's a bunch of beef bouillon under my front seat that I don't want in my car that I'm unaware of is there. A sexy lady who sounds like Inspector Clouseau is going to walk in during a podcast recording.
It's gold bullion.
gold bullion.
She has the choice of
Oh.
having gold bullion or beef bullion.
I thought
That's
you
what
were-
the genie tells her.
I misheard. I thought it was two different kinds of stock.
No, gold bullion.
Oh shit!
And then
So
there's
it's
beef bullion.
literally gold.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, now
$1 billion worth of gold.
Well, shit. That'd be heavy. How was I driving this car around with all
That's
that
the
gold in there?
efficiency of the Subarus. Even with $1 billion worth of gold, you maintain that amazing mileage and traction.
Right, but what ends up happening is in the path to seducing me for the bullion, she falls in love with me because she finds out I'm actually quite a catch.
Yep.
Right? And then it turns out she's like, listen, this accent I've been using, it's just because I'm a big fan of the Pink Panther movies.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the only way I know how to seduce someone. But can you accept me for who I truly am, which is as a woman with an American accent who lives in Ireland? And I was like, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
And then we go there, and then we continue the McDonald clan in that country.
That's interesting. I don't think that you'd be allowed to work in Ireland.
Well, I've got all this gold, and their
turns
leprechauns
out
are
your
low on
forester
gold.
is not the one that's got the gold bullion in it.
Well,
She's seducing every owner, and then she does fall in love with you. And that's the problem, is that like she falls in love, she tells you what's going on, you both go to look, and there's nothing in there
but then maybe
except for doll heads.
But then I go, hey, honey, let's find this forester that we're looking for, because maybe the owner will be someone I'm attracted to too, and then maybe we can make a throuple thing happen, right? We could both seduce this lady for her gold bullion, and then all three of us catch feelings for each other, and then we split the gold bullion in Ireland.
So in this situation, there's a potential that you could have 10,000, like a couple setup of 10,000 people, because there's so many foresters out there.
I would say
Here's
this.
the thing,
I'd say, ladies,
You know whose forester does have the gold, and you have to like
I would say,
like seduce. You know who it is?
no, it's not.
Your
it's,
dad.
It's not.
It's your
It isn't.
dad.
It isn't.
It's your dad.
It isn't.
Your dad's has it in there.
Nope. It was a mistake in the office because we're both named William Lucas and we both have Subaru Foresters. So it turns out they thought it was supposed to go to him, but it actually was supposed to go to me, and I got it. So
you're saying it's just like my scenario in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles with the pods, where there's a mistake, a
here's
clerical
what I'm
error.
saying. Here's what I'm saying.
Happens.
When me and Anastasia go and
Wait a
start
minute. So she's an American woman living in Ireland, and Michelle is
No,
too French.
she's an Irish woman with an American accent, but she has roots in Ireland, so it's easy to move back. But we need to seduce this other lady who's bisexual to be in a throuple with us. And then as we're doing that, and one night we're all sharing the same bed because we're just ravenous about each other. Like
Sure.
we really find, all three of us find each other incredibly attractive. And then I say, okay, team, we've got all this gold bullion, and I've got 2 words for you. High-speed rail between Fargo and Minneapolis. And they'll be like, that's more than 2 words. And I'm like, not if you say it really fast.
That's going to wrap it up for today's show. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to help us continue to produce new episodes each week, visit jjmeetsworld.com, where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some swag at the merch shop, or follow our link to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all the sites the cool kids are using these days. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by visiting moonbasemaria.com. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, check out linebenders.com, where you can find direct contact info for JJ or booking information. And here's the thing, she's got chlamydia.